David B. de Roches, an associate professor with the Near East South Asia Center for Strategic Studies. He joins me from Washington. David, thanks so much for joining us on the program. Now, the announcement that the U.S. is ending its support for the war in Yemen is a really big one. Biden also announced Tim Lenderking as the first U.S. envoy to Yemen since this war started. What does all of this now mean for a 6-year conflict that's left 80% of Yemen in dire need of humanitarian assistance?
Well, it's a good question. I don't think it'll mean much, to be honest. When you look at this U.S. support, most of that's been scaled back. I don't think there is any substantial offensive support. Initially, there was air-to-air refueling. There was sort of expedited logistics. That's all been curtailed. Most of the U.S. targeting assistance has been basically showing the Saudis places they don't want to drop bombs. I don't think Biden will curtail that in a meaningful way because it's counterproductive. And we have had an envoy. We had Matt Tuller was our envoy to Yemen. So we've had a very capable envoy there as well. So, but the main difference is one of tone. And so far, most of this foreign policy stuff we've seen, aside from the physical acts like rejoining the Paris Climate Accords, those are changes of tone. Whether there will actually be a policy difference remains to be seen.
And it's something that many people will be watching very closely. One of the other things that Biden says was that the U.S. will still provide defensive support, though, to Saudi Arabia against any attacks from Iran-supplied forces. How does all of this now impact and potentially change the relationship dynamics between Washington and Riyadh?
Yeah, that's a good question, and it's a really good point because, quite frankly, unless the Houthis, which are not created by Iran, but they're certainly supported by Iran, and their advanced weaponry comes from Iran, unless they restrain from attacks into the Saudi interior with missiles, with drones, as they've been doing, this really, this gives Saudi Arabia a lot of leverage. It's very hard when you're being, attacked by missiles. The best way to do that is not to try to shoot down every missile and go on the defense. It's to attack the missile sites. And so Biden's kind of in a box where if there is an attack on Saudi Arabia, he either has to buy into the Saudi agenda and say, right, we need to take out these sites, or he has to let a security partner suffer some pretty serious attacks, and neither one of those options is attractive. So this is going to be tough for the Biden administration.
Well, Joe Biden also said in that address on Thursday, America is back, diplomacy is back. Obviously, a bit of a swipe there at the former administration. But what does that mean for the wider conflicts the U.S. is or has been involved in, especially when we look at situations like Syria, Afghanistan, and Iran?
Yeah, good question. So those three countries you mentioned, quite frankly, the United States doesn't have a lot of good options. There's not a whole lot that we want to do or that we can do with what we're willing to commit. So, Syria, we went in there to defeat ISIS. For the most part, ISIS is defeated. The fact that it remains there is not really a function of anything the United States does or not to do. It's a function of the Russian and Iranian-led Syrian government, which continues to oppress its people, and misrule in Iraq because of, quite frankly, sectarian politics, primarily influenced by Iran. The fact that you have this ungovernable security force, the Hashd-e-Shaabi, that doesn't take orders from anybody other than Iran. So inevitably, you're going to have a governance problem among the Sunni provinces there. But the United States isn't willing to send large amounts of troops in there to solve that. And so that's Syria, that's Iran or Iraq, Afghanistan. The Obama administration, the W. Bush administration, the Trump administration all want to leave Afghanistan. There's a general recognition that there is nothing in Afghanistan that is worth the blood and treasure we've paid for it. And quite frankly, I think if you look at the policy actions, you won't be able to tell what was a Biden action, what was a Trump action, or what was an Obama action.
David B. de Roches, live to us there from the U.S. Capitol. Really appreciate your take on these latest comments about U.S.'s foreign policy. Thank you so much.